The Emirate of Córdoba was on the edge of collapse, plagued by rebels and threatened by a rival caliphate in North Africa preparing to strike. And then a 21-year-old stepped onto the throne. I'm David Cott, host of New History of Spain, and in episode 41 I explain how Abd al-Rahman III stopped the civil war and turned a dying emirate into a great power. The Accession of Abd al-Rahman III. Emir Abdallah named his grandson Abd al-Rahman as successor. It is striking that he chose a grandson rather than one of his own sons, in whom he placed little trust. In contrast, he allowed Abd al-Rahman to sit beside him during audiences to learn how to govern at a time when Umayyad power remained fragile despite the successes seen in the late reign of Abdallah. Perhaps Abdallah believed a grandson would be easier to guide, or that by raising him as a favorite, he could atone for past failures as a father. Or maybe he simply recognized in Abd al-Rahman a promising young man capable of restoring Umayyad authority in al-Andalus and confronting the growing Fatimid threat. Arabic chronicles highlight the unity of the Umayyad family behind Abd al-Rahman III. No one questioned the succession, not even his uncles, seasoned military and political leaders who were, on paper, better qualified. As always, an oath-taking ceremony was held, beginning with the closest Umayyad relatives, then Umayyad clients, Córdoba's notables, and finally the common people. His designation may also have been influenced by the fact that he was an energetic 21-year-old when he became emir in 912, and by his name, Abd al-Rahman, like the founding emir of the Emirate of Córdoba. The parallels don't end there. His closest collaborator was named Badr, like the freedman of the first emir, and the Syrian army of Damascus was the first group to support him, as they had supported his great ancestor. All these similarities help create a self-fulfilling prophecy and political narrative presenting Abd al-Rahman III as the reconqueror of al-Andalus. Maribel Fierro notes that he was the 8th Emir of Córdoba, and the number 7 in Islamic tradition symbolizes the end of a cycle. Likewise, the Umayyad caliphs of Damascus numbered 14, and under the 7th, al-Andalus was conquered. The 8th, Umar II, was revered for his piety. The transition from Abdallah to Abd al-Rahman III also aligned with the start of a new century in the Islamic calendar. Symbolically, a cycle had ended, and a new one began with another Abd al-Rahman destined to usher in a new cycle of prosperity to the Umayyad dynasty. Who was Abd al-Rahman III of Córdoba? The accomplishments of Abd al-Rahman III are well known. He inherited a realm fragmented by rebellions, weakened central authority, and exposed frontiers. Yet he put all the Andalusi provinces under his control, confronted the Fatimids, and eventually reclaimed the caliphal title once held by his ancestors in Damascus. Under his rule, the Caliphate of Córdoba became a major power in Europe, checked the Christian kingdoms, projected influence into the Maghreb, and received ambassadors from distant lands in a capital that became one of the largest and most splendid cities in the world. That summarizes his accomplishments, but who was Abd al-Rahman III as a person? He was born in 891, the year when Umar ibn Hafsun nearly besieged Córdoba but lost at the Battle of Polei. He was born after the assassination of his father, and his mother was a Vasconic Christian concubine, leading him to speak both Arabic and Andalusi Romance. On his father's side, his grandmother was Oneca, daughter of King Fortun of Pamplona, making Queen Toda of Pamplona his aunt, a family tie that later proved important in diplomatic negotiations. The Emir and Caliph fathered 16 daughters and 19 sons, and he was succeeded in 961 by his son Al-Hakam II, already in his 40s due to Abd al-Rahman's long reign. Physically, he is described as fair-skinned, with dark blue eyes and an attractive face. His height was medium to short because of his short legs. He dyed his beard black to fit the Arab aesthetic ideal, for although Umayyad rulers were considered Arabs, their actual lineage increasingly reflected Iberian ancestry, as each generation descended from mothers of local origin. This serves as a reminder that race or ethnicity is a social construct. Court propagandists describe him as just, generous, intelligent, bold, and capable of forgiving rebels. Arabic sources also record his flaws. He drank alcohol despite its prohibition and behaved poorly when drunk. He encouraged excessive luxury. Worst of all was his capacity for cruelty, especially after assuming the caliphate, when he seemed to believe nothing constrained him. Ibn Hazm even compared him to Emir al-Hakam I, notorious for his brutality. Some disturbing episodes appear in the chronicles. For unknown reasons, he once ordered several black slaves hung from a water wheel to death. On another occasion, during the Feast of Sacrifice, he personally executed a treacherous son before the highest Andalusi dignitaries, imitating the Quranic story of Abraham. His worst behavior was toward women. After a concubine resisted his drunk advances, he ordered that her face be branded with a hot iron. In another case, a slave who refused sexual relations and begged for mercy was beheaded. We must therefore weigh his political role against a character full of troubling shadows. How was it possible to end the Fitna of the Emirate? When Abd al-Rahman became Emir, Umayyad authority extended little beyond Córdoba. The capital was firmly under his control, but surrounding regions were fragmented into pockets of loyalty separated by rebel-held roots. This was despite Abdallah's late victories, which restored some Umayyad prestige. The situation was no longer as disastrous as in the 890s, but still quite adverse. How then did Abd al-Rahman III reverse this? One of his first acts after succeeding his grandfather in October 912 was to send envoys throughout al-Andalus to demand oaths of loyalty and announce his intention to restore Umayyad glory, peacefully if possible, by force if necessary. Most governors recognized him in principle as they had recognized Abdallah, but acknowledging legitimacy did not mean accepting the loss of the near-total autonomy local powers had come to enjoy. The new emir therefore had a daunting task ahead. Earlier historians often attributed reunification to Abd al-Rahman III's political and military brilliance alone. While he was undoubtedly gifted, his personal qualities would have been useless without certain key resources that made his success possible. A decisive factor was that Abdallah had preserved the Umayyads as the primary source of political legitimacy in Muslim Iberia. This allowed Abd al-Rahman to reassert authority across al-Andalus largely through diplomacy, supported by the fact that loyalists existed everywhere. Abdallah's late military successes also revived coin minting, replenished the treasury with taxes and special contributions, and provided the financial base his grandson needed. Meanwhile, during the 50 years of Fitna or civil war, Arabization and Islamization continued to grow, integrating converts and non-Arab groups into an Islamic society more receptive to Umayyad rule. The unwavering support of Umayyad relatives, clients, and the Syrian Arab military regiment from Damascus, stationed in Elvira, later joined by those of Emesa and Kinasrin, was crucial. These groups had long formed the backbone of Umayyad power, supplying officials and commanders since the beginning of the Emirate. The expansion of the loyal Umayyad army was made possible not only by old bonds of fidelity, but also by practical incentives. Increased royal revenues meant higher soldier stipends. Campaigns promised greater booty under the emir than under any rebel, and loyal troops could receive control of fortresses and their surrounding lands as rewards. Many prominent rebels eventually accepted the emir's pardon, moved to Córdoba with their families under generous terms, and were even enrolled as professional soldiers. Some sons of Umar ibn Hafsun, descendants of Badajoz rebel founder Ibn Marwan, and a lord who once dominated dozens of fortresses in Jaén, all ended up serving the emir. Newly subdued territories provided fresh taxes and levies, and economic activity improved with the return of the statist order. State revenues and military strength grew accordingly. As the emir's power became overwhelming compared to that of the rebels, many of them felt intimidated and submitted without a fight. Those who had submitted were also far less likely to rebel again than under previous emirs, since Abd al-Rahman had enough troops to garrison fortresses effectively. Still, some rebellions persisted under strong local leaders. Umayyad taxation was heavy and became even heavier after the proclamation of the Caliphate, so many people saw little benefit in accepting Umayyad control. Abd al-Rahman confronted the reunification of al-Andalus with patience and method. He kept armies circulating constantly, eliminating disloyal local dynasties and replacing them with trustworthy men and well-rooted regional families. As his power became more absolute, he imposed harsher terms on formerly rebellious clans in an effort to weaken regional strongmen. This policy had mixed results. Although he frequently rotated office holders, in frontier regions like Toledo and Zaragoza, he had to grant autonomy and privileges to put an end to the chronic frontier revolts seen under the Emirate of Córdoba. Initially relying on the Syrian armies, Arab families, and Umayyad clients, Abd al-Rahman gradually incorporated new men, Mu'alads, Berbers, Jews, and slaves and freedmen, into the central administration and army. For example, he strengthened Al-Hakam I's original slave army with new Sakaliba, that is, enslaved soldiers of European origin, who gained influence in administration and the military, as elsewhere in the Islamic world. This shift became especially noticeable after the defeat at Simancas in 939. His formula for ending the Fitna combined force and diplomacy in a calculated Kerautanistic strategy, pardoning and integrating those who submitted while ruthlessly crushing those who resisted. As his domain expanded, tax revenues rose, allowing him to transform the downward spiral that had nearly destroyed the Umayyads into a new cycle of consolidation and growth. The first Reconquest campaigns of Abd al-Rahman III. In the very first month of his reign, Abd al-Rahman III struck decisively at the Berber Banu Dilnun of Santander, roughly Cuenca province, after the patriarch, despite swearing loyalty, immediately attacked the town of Calatrava with other rebels. Such inter-Muslim warfare had been common during the Fitna, but the new emir refused to tolerate it. The Umayyads defeated the clan, executed their main ally, and displayed his head in Córdoba, the first of many rebel executions. 3 months after Abd al-Rahman's enthronement, his Hajib, or Prime Minister Badr ibn Ahmad, marched south and took Écija, which surrendered without resistance. This was the first Hafsunite stronghold to fall. Its people received the pardon, but the bridge linking it to Hafsunite territory and its walls were demolished, a traditional Umayyad tactic to prevent new revolts. The citadel was garrisoned, and many locals joined the Umayyad army with attractive concessions. This blend of military pressure and negotiation became Abd al-Rahman's usual method. Each case was assessed individually with privileges and stipends granted in exchange for surrender. In April 913, the emir led the celebrated Monteleon campaign through Hafsunite territory in Jaén and Granada. Unlike his grandfather, who led armies only in dire moments, he personally commanded the troops, taking fortress after fortress. Many surrendered without resistance after the burning of the castle of Monteleon and the massacre of its defenders. Umar ibn Hafsun, meanwhile, failed to seize Elvira, the city that preceded Granada in the region. To secure loyalties, the emir demanded hostages, taxes, and the placement of his own men in garrisons. Many fortified settlements were dismantled and their populations relocated to the plains where they could be dominated more easily. Abd al-Rahman sometimes adopted a total war approach. For example, he burned the suburbs of a Hafsunite fortress, and his troops devastated the countryside across the Alpujarras in the Sierra Nevada of Granada. He even used catapults and cut off water supplies to force the surrender of a mountain fortress. Most defenders were pardoned, though a few Christians were executed for breaking the Dhimmi Pact. The next year, Umayyad armies swept through the districts of Malaga and Algeciras, burning ships belonging to Hafsunite allies and establishing a naval blockade to prevent supplies or mercenaries from reaching Umar ibn Hafsun, especially from the recently founded Fatimid Caliphate. According to 11th century historian Ibn Hayyan, loyal sailors from Malaga, Seville, and other cities equipped their vessels with Greek fire and patrolled the coast from Algeciras to Tutmir. Control of the sea was essential to ending the Fitna, containing the Fatimid threat and asserting hegemony in the western Mediterranean. The Hafsunite rebellion, isolated and economically damaged, was again confined to the mountains of Malaga. In 914, Abd al-Rahman regained Baza and Malaga, the latter a loyal city often cut off from Córdoba because rebels controlled the roads. A key objective of the campaign was to eliminate Hafsunite fortresses threatening Malaga. Loyalty was rewarded and disloyalty punished, a lesson understood by Archidona. Although Archidona had long held the status of provincial capital because an Arab military regiment was stationed there, it frequently fell to the Hafsunites, while Malaga remained loyal. As order was restored, Malaga became capital of its district, reflecting both its economic importance and its value for Umayyad ambitions in North Africa. The end of the Fitna thus brought a territorial reorganization. Among these early victories, the Reconquest of Seville in December 913 was decisive. After the death of the Banu Hayyai patriarch, the clan split between two rival sons. These internal disputes favored Abd al-Rahman, who negotiated with the branch controlling the town of Carmona, whose lord also gathered troops from Niebla and Sidonia in hopes of receiving the governorship of Seville. The Banu Hayyai of Seville called on Umar ibn Hafsun for help, but he was defeated and returned humiliated to his stronghold of Bobastro. After months of siege by Badr ibn Ahmad, Seville surrendered. Its walls, rebuilt during Abd al-Rahman II's reign to defend against Vikings, were again demolished, and thousands of soldiers were incorporated into the Umayyad army. However, instead of appointing the Lord of Carmona as governor, the emir chose a trusted relative. Carmona's lord rebelled, was defeated, and was made a courtier. Though he later joined an expedition against Ibn Hafsun, he eventually rebelled again. Abd al-Rahman could forgive someone once, as he believed in second chances, but he didn't believe in a third chance. The rebel was imprisoned and died the following year. In 917, two expeditions succeeded. One eastward brought Murcia and Valencia back under control. In Pechina, Almeria, local notables helped replace a disloyal governor, and Abd al-Rahman accepted their choice. A western campaign led by Badr subdued Carmona, Niebla, Sidonia, and Santarém. Within just 5 years, Abd al-Rahman III had reimposed central authority over most of southern Iberia, from southern Portugal to Murcia, Valencia, and the Balearic Islands. The only territories left to dominate were the mountain territories controlled by Umar ibn Hafsun's sons and the frontier marches. Danger in the Maghreb, the founding of the Fatimid Caliphate. It's time to widen our perspective and look beyond the Iberian Peninsula to the rest of the Islamic world, especially the Maghreb. And if you have made it this far and you are new here, please subscribe to the show, New History of Spain. And if you really enjoy my content, you can support me on Patreon or with a donation. Links are in the description. Before discussing the Fatimids, it's useful to recall the situation of the Abbasid Caliphate and the Sunni-Shia divide. This conflict goes back to the unresolved question of succession before the Prophet Muhammad's death, a dispute that permanently divided Muslims, as I explained back in episode 21, Islam and the Arab Conquests Explained. Sunni Muslims, the majority, accept the legitimacy of the first caliphs, the Umayyads, and the Abbasids. For them, the caliph was, above all, a political leader, while religious authority rested with the ulema, the experts in theology and law. Shia Muslims instead believed that only a relative of the Prophet may legitimately rule, and that the imams, divinely appointed and infallible, hold supreme political and spiritual authority. The Umayyads rose to power in direct opposition to Ali, Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, which explains their hostility toward the Shia and why Shiism never gained ground in al-Andalus. The Abbasids originally drew Shia support because they descended from one of Muhammad's uncles, but as Shiism became more rigid, limiting true descent to the line of Muhammad's daughter, Fatima, they were no longer accepted as imams. Meanwhile, the collapse of the Umayyad Caliphate created a fragmented Islamic world, especially in the Maghreb and al-Andalus. The 4th Fitna in the 9th century allowed local dynasties to gain autonomy, and the assassination of Caliph al-Mutawakkil in 861 accelerated provincial independence, making the Caliph of Baghdad little more than a figurehead. Political instability and the new Islamic century fostered expectations of the coming of the Mahdi, the messianic figure destined to restore true Islam before the end times. The Fatimids exploited these hopes. They promoted Ismailism, the Shia branch that holds Ismail ibn Jafar to be the 7th Imam who entered occultation and will return as the Mahdi. Their doctrine emphasized symbolic cycles and history culminating with the number 7. Of course, once in power and realizing that their conquests were stalling and that the war was clearly not about to end, they had to rely on a more stable claim to legitimacy, that they descended from Ali and Fatima through their son Hussein. This made them rivals of the Idrisids of Morocco, who descended from Hassan. Many biographers, however, questioned the Fatimid genealogy, claiming their founder, Said ibn al-Hussein, later known as al-Mahdi Billah, belonged only to a family that acted as intermediaries for the hidden Imam, the true descendant of the Prophet. Regardless, Said ibn al-Hussein possessed an effective network of propagandists. One of them, Abu Abdallah, achieved remarkable success among the Kutama Berbers of Western Ifriqiya, who resented Aghlabid rule and had never fully subjugated. While Fatimid agitation failed in Syria, it prospered in the Maghreb, in part due to the discontent caused by the Aghlabid conquest of Sicily. The Kutama seized eastern Algeria, and Abu Abdallah summoned the Mahdi, but he ended up imprisoned in the city of Sihil Massa in southeastern Morocco. By 909, the revolt triumphed. The Aghlabids were overthrown by an army that did not yet know the true identity of its future caliph. This resembled the Abbasid revolution, whose soldiers also fought for a cause without knowing the exact claimant until the end. Abu Abdallah, like the Abbasid general Abu Muslim, was later assassinated for being too influential. After conquering Ifriqiya, the Fatimid army marched to liberate the Mahdi from Sihil Massa. On the way, they toppled the Rustamid imamate of the herd, long-time Umayyad allies despite not being Sunni Muslims. The governor of Sihil Massa fled, the city was sacked, and Said ibn al-Hussein revealed himself as al-Mahdi Billah. In early 910, he was proclaimed caliph in Kairouan, instituted a new prayer formula, and announced his divinely guided mission to conquer the world. This marked the foundation of the Fatimid Caliphate, but what matters for our story is why they posed a threat to the Umayyads ruling al-Andalus. The Fatimids claimed the most prestigious possible lineage, direct descent from the Prophet, and preached the overthrow of tyrants and the restoration of authentic Islam, whatever that means. Their legitimacy appeared stronger than that of the Umayyads, a dynasty remembered as originating from a powerful Meccan clan once hostile to Muhammad. The Idrisids of Morocco, though also descendants of Ali, had fragmented into small principalities and were no longer a danger. The Fatimids were a different matter, ambitious, expansionist, theocratic, and rapidly enlarging their influence. Their ideology emphasized the absolute authority of the Imam Caliph, whom they portrayed as a divinely empowered figure. Having such a claimant near the borders of al-Andalus and potentially able to rally Berber populations was a serious concern for Abd al-Rahman III. The Fatimid threat was one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, why Abd al-Rahman III adopted the caliphal title of his ancestors. In the decades that followed, the Umayyads and Fatimids fought a proxy war in the western Maghreb. The conflict included not only claims of legitimacy but also economic competition for control of trans-Saharan trade routes leading to the gold fields and slave markets of West Africa. The first confrontation came in 917, when the Fatimids invaded the Emirate of Córdoba, ruled by the Banu Salih, royal vassals of Córdoba. The Fatimids killed its ruler, prompting his sons to flee by sea to Malaga and to take refuge at Córdoba's court. The Umayyad ruler welcomed them and helped one of them reconquer Córdoba 2 years later while acknowledging Umayyad overlordship. Throughout the 920s and 930s, Córdoba changed hands repeatedly until Salihid control finally stabilized under Umayyad protection. The last years of Umar ibn Hafsun. Umar ibn Hafsun, the foremost enemy of the Umayyads during the Fitna of the Emirate of Córdoba, fought 4 emirs throughout his life. Abd al-Rahman III dedicated his early efforts to eliminating the now elderly rebel before fully turning to the frontiers of al-Andalus and expanding his influence beyond the Iberian Peninsula. In the Monteleon campaign, Abd al-Rahman III executed numerous Hafsunite military leaders, key personnel whose loss weakened a rebellion that had already lost its momentum. That same year, 2 envoys from the newly formed Fatimid Caliphate visited Bobastro, raising questions about the political program Umar sought to implement and about his foreign alliances. An Arabic chronicle reports that it was Umar who contacted the conquerors of the Aghlabid and Rustamid domains. Their emissaries urged him to swear obedience to the Fatimid Imam and accept Ismaili missionaries. Ibn Hafsun adopted the Shia rite and sent his oath of loyalty to the Fatimid Caliph al-Mahdi Billah, though he called him only sovereign or king, not caliph. In return, al-Mahdi recognized Umar's dominion over all al-Andalus in opposition to their shared enemy, the Umayyads. But within 2 years, Umar abandoned the alliance, likely because al-Andalus lacked a Shia social base and the Fatimids hadn't provided him with any meaningful assistance. It served him better to maintain religious ambiguity, appealing to both Christians and Sunni Muslims, than to introduce Fatimid ideology from scratch. In 915, a severe drought caused widespread famine and an epidemic, preventing both Leonese and Andalusi forces from launching new campaigns. Abd al-Rahman III could not continue his offensives against Umar, forcing both sides to negotiate. With mediation from the Bishop of Bobastro and the Hajib Badr ibn Ahmad, Umar agreed to end his rebellion. Although the exact terms are unknown, he and his supporters retained many fortresses without direct Umayyad intervention. Some followers were unhappy, but the old rebel sought only peace late in life. He named his eldest son Jafar as heir, but another son, Suleiman, rallied mostly Christian dissidents and rebelled in Ubeda. To prove his loyalty to the emir, Umar attacked Suleiman, forced his surrender, and imprisoned him in Bobastro for months. The emir then appointed a Christian governor in Ubeda, likely to mend relations with the community. But again, Suleiman used his freedom to seize Ubeda. Umar besieged him once more, but this time the Umayyad army intervened, compelled his surrender, and pardoned him. Suleiman was taken to Córdoba and incorporated into the army with a good stipend. Sick, old, and deserted by many followers because of his defeats and submission to Abd al-Rahman III, Umar ibn Hafsun died at 72 in his Malaga stronghold in early 918. The Umayyads interpreted his death as a divine sign foretelling the end of sedition in al-Andalus. His descendants continued the struggle for another decade, but without his charisma and facing the emir's growing success, the Hafsunids remained on the defensive until their final defeat. The reign of the sons of Alfonso III of Asturias. As I explained in episode 38, Expansion and Betrayal, under Alfonso III of Asturias, the Asturian king had been deposed by his three sons, who divided his domains in 910. From this point, we speak of kings in Leon and Galicia in addition to Asturias, with Leon becoming the hegemonic seat. Still in the early Middle Ages, states were not formally defined entities. The title of king mattered more than fixed borders. Garcia, the eldest, governed Leon, Castile, and Álava, and was acknowledged as superior by his brothers. Ordoño ruled Galicia and northern Portugal, and Fruela governed Asturias. The political center did not immediately shift from the Cantabrian Mountains to the northern Meseta. The process was gradual, beginning before 910, but not solidifying until Ramiro II's reign in the mid-10th century. Sources from the early Kingdom of Leon are less detailed than the Asturian ones, so written records from the 10th century are brief. We know Garcia I led a raid toward Toledo in 911, plundering and capturing hundreds of slaves. The first Castilian annals report that in 912, three Castilian counts incorporated the towns of Roa, Osma, Aza, Clunia, and San Esteban de Gormaz, extending the Castilian frontier to the Douro River with Garcia's approval. This frontier will remain a zone of near constant conflict for a century, giving rise to the concept of Extremadura, the land of the extremes or frontiers, first applied to San Esteban de Gormaz and Soria province. Garcia also supported Castilian efforts to conquer La Rioja, coveted by Pamplona and still defended by the Banu Qasi. Suddenly, Garcia fell ill and died childless in the city of Zamora after only 3 years of rule. His brother, Ordoño II of Galicia, inherited the Leonese crown. His accession was welcomed by magnates and clergy because Ordoño had already distinguished himself in warfare against Muslims of western al-Andalus. As king in Galicia, he occupied Évora, modern capital of the Portuguese Alentejo region, killing all the men and enslaving nearly 4,000 women and children, an atrocity that Arabic chroniclers noted as unprecedented in Andalusi history. This underscores something often forgotten, especially in national Catholic narratives. Christians committed enslavement and atrocities as Muslims did. The main difference in the early Middle Ages was that the Muslim military power was superior. The Muslim frontier population now felt the insecurity Christians had long endured. Many communities began to build castles or fortified towns. The Lord of Badajoz, descendant of Ibn Marwan, feared Berbers might settle in depopulated Évora and threaten his domain. So he destroyed its defenses and later rebuilt the city with help from the son of Sadun al-Surumbaki, a former ally of Ibn Marwan and Alfonso III. These events show how far Galician forces penetrated into al-Andalus, revealing the lack of significant settlements and fortifications in the western southern Douro basin. Once king of Leon, Ordoño II launched an ambitious expedition against Mérida, capital of the Lower March, long diminished since Badajoz founding. The Leonese first subdued Medellín, later the birthplace of Hernán Cortés. Two Berbers who were forced to act as guides deliberately misled the Christian army to save the native Mérida. Admirable from an Andalusi perspective, but fatal for them. Their sacrifice allowed Mérida to raise the alarm and shelter nearby populations behind its walls. The Leonese camped before the citadel but did not attack. Mérida's lord instead sent valuable gifts to persuade Ordoño to withdraw. The king returned to León with plentiful booty, livestock, captives, silk, gold and silver, which he invested in churches and palaces. He then worked with King Sancho I of Pamplona to seize strongholds from the Banu Qasi in La Rioja, who were again infighting. Sancho conquered Arnedo and captured the Banu Qasi lord of Tudela, releasing him in exchange for villages and 2 hostages, one of them Urraca, who became the second wife of King Fruela II of Asturias and later León. With notable victories in central al-Andalus, Abd al-Rahman III felt ready to resume jihad against the northern Christians, who had raided the frontier with impunity for decades. One of the emir's key responsibilities was guarding Islam's borders, and as scholars like Javier Albarrán note, jihad served internal political purposes by strengthening central control over the lords of the frontiers. The first Cordoban expedition came in 916, led by the veteran general Abi Abda, credited with helping preserve the Umayyad dynasty under Abdallah. The campaign devastated an unspecified Christian region and returned with booty. Its importance lay in being the first emiral raid in decades to reach Christian territory. In 917, Abi Abda marched on Castilian lands, besieging San Esteban de Gormaz. Ordoño II responded swiftly, and the Leonese army's arrival caused desertions within the Umayyad ranks. The Battle of Castromoros followed. Leonese chronicles exaggerated its scale, claiming the number of corpses exceeded the number of stars, but the victory was real. Abi Abda was captured and beheaded, his head displayed beside that of a wild boar on the walls of San Esteban de Gormaz. The King of León was sending a clear message. This was the fate awaiting Muslims who dared attack. However, Abd al-Rahman III was not going to leave this humiliation unanswered.
The verdict!
In today's verdict, I want to revisit the idea of distinguishing a political figure from the private individual, or more broadly, separating professional achievements from personal morality. This ties into what I said about Abd al-Rahman III. Although admired for his political success, little attention is paid to his cruelty and abusive behavior. We can clearly say that he was a bad person, including by the moral standards of the time, since authors from this period criticize him for his cruelty. It's easy to praise or condemn an entire person without considering that most people can be analyzed within a shade of grace. How do you think we should analyze complex figures like Abd al-Rahman III from a moral perspective? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And with that, the verdict ends. If you have liked this episode, please give it a thumbs up, share it, and support my work on patreon.com/newhistoryspain, where you can get exclusive benefits like early access to all my content. In the next episode, we continue with the political history of the 920s, the struggles in the Upper March, the end of the Banu Qasi, the conclusion of both the Hafsun revolt and the Fitna, and the proclamation of the Caliphate of Córdoba. Thanks for listening, and see you next time!